Hi, welcome to Open Door Yoga. My name is Michelle, and this video is part of my Yoga for Everyone series. Today we're going to be talking about 4 practices that may be beneficial when working with a student who has asthma. Before we dive in, quick disclaimer. As with all health conditions, not everyone with asthma is going to present the same way or benefit from the same strategies or yoga practices. As a yoga instructor, the most important thing that you can consider, in addition to safety, of course, is comfort. Stress can exacerbate symptoms of asthma, like difficulty breathing. And by putting a student in a state of stress, we could just be making things worse. The best thing you can do is have an open conversation with your student so that they can understand exactly what's going to be happening, what the potential benefits are, and they can decide if they are comfortable with it or not. Additionally, a lot of the strategies I'm going to talk about today relate to those 5 inefficient breathing patterns that we talked about just a couple weeks ago. If you missed that video, I'm going to link it below. Check it out if you think it's going to be helpful. It might help put a lot of the pieces together so that you can see it a little bit more clearly. With all that being said, let's jump in. Number 1, Svadhyaya or self-study. When we think about the 8 limbs of yoga, we always start with number 1 and number 2, the yamas and the niyamas. Well, Svadhyaya, that's a niyama. It's one of those inward observances. What I love about it is it's this way of self-study that is very intentional and purposeful. And working with a student with asthma, you could take a couple of different approaches. The first is through tracking sheets or logs. My full-time job is as an OT, and I use tracking sheets all the time. I think it's helpful for students to start seeing factors and patterns and how they relate with each other. It also helps you as an instructor or a clinician better understand not only those factors and patterns, but also starting to see some of that individual's values, what their day looks like, so you can make the most effective and beneficial recommendations. Now, working with a student with asthma, there's a few things you'd want to consider tracking. First, their asthma symptoms. How frequently they occur, when they occur, the intensity of those symptoms. You also want to think about things like sleep. How much sleep the person's getting at night, the type of sleep that they're getting. What type of exercise do they participate in? What is the intensity of that exercise? Even the foods they eat. Anything that can impact or factor into the development of difficulty breathing or some specific asthma symptoms. What's nice about this approach is it's also going to bring a little bit of mindfulness towards the breathing pattern that that person's experiencing. And when we do that, it's going to help tune into some of those nuances of the breath. That's going to help understand triggers and when symptoms are starting to arise faster so that that person can better manage them. Another approach you can take with Svadhyaya is actually based in the research. So there was a really cool study done for participants who have asthma. They split into 2 groups, and it was all about journaling. One group had to journal about more emotionally significant situations that happened in their lives, so they had to do a little bit more self-study. And the other group had to participate by journaling in journaling situations that are a little bit more emotionally neutral. Well, that first group had a 20% increase in their FEV1. And for those of you who, like me, does not know what FEV1 is, it is the amount of air that a person can exhale or expel from their body in 1 second. And I'm sure that you can see how that could be helpful for somebody with asthma. Now, Svadhyaya is the best place to start in my mind because it helps the individual start to self-reflect. It helps you build that relationship, and it can also be done in the privacy of the person's home. Who wants to have to go to a studio, right? By journaling, by tracking in your own home, it's going to be a little bit more comfortable. It's going to put us a little bit more at ease. And also, habits, right? When we do something every day, we're much more likely to build it into our daily routine and be consistent. So it's a great place to start. Number 2, Shatkarma. Shatkarma is one of those yogic purification techniques or kriyas that we can use to help keep our body clean and healthy. An example of Shatkarma that you could use specifically for a student with asthma is a neti pot. For those of you who have not heard of a neti pot, they are everywhere. The idea is that you can use one to rinse saline solution through your nasal passages to clean them out. You're going to have a lot of students that are not open to trying a neti pot. That is just fine. But for the students who are open to it, it may be a beneficial tool. The idea behind a neti pot is that it helps clean out the nasal passages, and by doing so, it's removing irritants or allergens that could potentially lead to asthmatic symptoms. Another cool thing about the neti pot is it just brings a little bit more mindful awareness to the nose. And like we talked about a couple weeks ago, some students with asthma have a tendency to breathe through their mouth on their inhales and exhales alone. And there's benefit to using the nose to involve that in the breathing process. And so bringing a little bit of mindful awareness to the nose can subsequently help with just developing a more efficient breathing pattern as well. Number 3, engage the abdominal muscles during exhale. One of the things I love about yoga is whether you're seated, practicing pranayama, or moving through a standing asana flow, there is a focus on integrity of the core. And when we engage our abdominal muscles during an exhale, we can release just a little bit more air than we'd be able to do so otherwise. And this is great for students with asthma. Like we talked about a couple weeks ago, it can be more difficult for someone who has asthma to exhale than it is to inhale. So this could just help them out a little bit more. Another great thing about strengthening and using those abdominal muscles is it naturally leads to better posture. And when we have better posture, we have better lung capacity. It's much easier to fill up our entire rib cage and get a nice full inhale. Number 4, specific yoga postures. This one's a little tricky. I'm going to go through the three main postures or groups of postures that yoga instructors like to use with students with asthma, but we're also going to go through some considerations. Because like we said earlier, not every student is going to benefit from every posture, and sometimes postures can make students feel very uncomfortable, and we don't want stress. The first group of postures are back extensions or back bends. Many students with asthma have a tendency to breathe into their chest than using their full lung space. And so it can feel really good to get into a back extension physically. It can stretch out some of the muscles that get a little bit tight, a little bit sore, maybe you're holding some tension. The problem is, if you haven't worked on any other pranayama practices and that student is solely breathing through their chest, it might be a little scary to go into a full back extension because it's going to make it harder to breathe. So make sure that you've practiced an alternative breathing pattern that student feels comfortable with. And I would also recommend starting small. Start with very gentle back extensions that are very easy to get out of. That's going to help your student feel safe. Number 2, inversions. Inversions can be awesome for a student with asthma. What happens when you're inverted is it kind of frees up your diaphragm or that muscle of respiration a little bit. And it actually helps it work a little bit more efficiently on those exhales. The problem is when we think about inversions, we think about headstands, shoulder stands, handstands, and that can seem very overwhelming for a new student. So just make sure, again, you're starting small, you're describing the inversion that you're choosing, you're giving lots of props, and you're giving ample opportunity for the student to bail out if they don't like it. Number 3, Shavasana. Shavasana is not a posture that we typically think about having a lot of contraindications around. However, for a student who's having a hard time breathing, when you're laying down on your back body, just think about when you're sick. It can be a lot harder to breathe than when you're inclined or seated upright. So if we want them to get the full benefits of that restorative posture, really allowing them to slow their body down, make sure that you give them lots of supportive options. Maybe help them incline their body a little bit through bolsters and blankets and blocks so that they can really settle in and reap all of the benefits. As always, thank you for joining me today. As a yoga instructor, I really hope that this video helps you feel more confident and more comfortable working with students of all different bodies and abilities. If you have any comments, any questions, any requests, leave a comment below. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Namaste.